Hello and welcome to ACE the English Hub. We are beginning another series of videos on taxonomies of educational objectives. Let's first discuss the terms we see in this title, taxonomy and educational objectives. Taxonomy is a science of classification. It is a system for naming and organizing things. Educational objectives are statements that clearly describe what the learner will know or be able to do as a result of having attended an educational program or activity. Educational objectives are observable and measurable. It is the purpose for which any particular educational undertaking is carried out. So, a taxonomy of educational objectives means the organization of the different levels of capabilities a learner achieves as he passes through his educational program. The idea of a taxonomy of educational objectives emerged at an informal meeting of college examiners attending the American Psychological Association convention at Boston in 1948. It was agreed to classify educational objectives under three domains: cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. The changes in the three domains are interrelated and mutually dependent. A team of professors headed by American academic and educational expert Dr. Benjamin S. Bloom of the University of Chicago developed books on taxonomy of educational objectives in 1956. The team arranged the sequence of development of mental abilities in a logical and psychological order. The major concept of the taxonomy is that educational objectives can be arranged in a hierarchy. This hierarchy starts from a less complex level and moves towards more complex levels of knowledge. These taxonomies are often referred to as Bloom's taxonomy. Bloom was the editor of the work. The first taxonomy to be published was the taxonomy of the educational objective cognitive domain. This work is considered the first real effort to identify what learning really was. In today's video, we will be discussing the cognitive domain introduced by Bloom. The revised version of the domain, which was introduced much later, will be discussed in our next video. Do subscribe so that you don't miss out on our content. So let's see the cognitive domain as explained by Bloom and its team first. This domain represents the intellectual component of mental life. It is the most primary and most important aspect of education. It involves the acquisition of knowledge and the development of intellectual competencies. The objectives within this domain are knowing, thinking, and problem solving. There are 6 major classes of objectives that can be arranged in hierarchical order. This order is based on the complexity of tasks from the simple to the complex. The order formulated by Bloom in the first part, published in 1956, listed 6 hierarchical levels of mental capabilities: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Let's look at each of these levels one by one. Knowledge corresponds to remembering. It is the lowest level of the intellectual structure model. It involves the recall or recognition of specifics, universal patterns, structure, etc. There are many learning objectives to achieve at this level. Here are some of them: knowledge of specific facts, knowledge of rules, knowledge of conventions, of order or sequence of things, classification, categories, established facts and criteria. There goes a list. Basically, it deals with knowledge, knowing things. This level will help the learner answer the following questions. When you see questions like these in your question paper, remember that the evaluator wants to check how much knowledge you have acquired. You may pause the video for a few seconds and look at these questions so that you'll get a better idea of things. Comprehension is a higher level than knowledge. It involves an understanding of the material being communicated. Comprehension is all about the internalization of knowledge. The learner moves beyond the level of recall and recognition and starts to process the information intellectually. It is only when you have known something that you can understand it. Translation, interpretation, and extrapolation are the three types of comprehensive behavior. Translation involves the ability to translate relationships expressed in symbolic form. The symbolic form can be anything, including illustrations or maps or tables. So the learner will be able to translate these ideas shown in tables or diagrams, to verbal form, or even vice versa. Translation also involves the ability to read musical scores, the ability to read an architectural plan, the ability to translate non-literal statements like metaphor, symbolism, irony, all these to ordinary English. That is, if you can identify the meaning of a metaphor or identify the meaning of a symbolism used in a text, you have this ability to comprehend and to translate. The ability to comprehend the significance of the particular words of a poem in the light of their context. Now the second one, interpretation. Interpretation means an explanation or opinion of what something means. Interpretation goes beyond mere literal translation. The learner is able to identify the interrelationships among parts and components. One example will be to interpret a chart or graph, to understand the interrelationships among the ideas in a chart. Now, what is extrapolation? It means to guess or think about what might happen using the information that is already known. Extrapolation involves the ability to deal with the conclusions of a work in terms of inferences made from the explicit statements. The ability to draw conclusions and state them effectively. The learner recognizes the limitations of the data and formulates accurate inferences and hypothesis. Skill in predicting the continuation of trends, skill in interpolation where there are gaps in data, the ability to estimate or predict consequences of causes of action described in a communication, the ability to distinguish consequences. Why did this happen? Why did this not happen? Questions that check your level of understanding will include these questions. Do pause and take a look. Now, application. Here, the individual uses his knowledge and comprehension of concepts, principles, ideas, or procedures in a novel situation for solving a specific problem. So, you are taking your idea to a new situation and applying your knowledge. The use of abstractions in a concrete situation is called application. General ideas, rules, procedures, technical terms, theories, etc. are put into application here. After acquiring knowledge of these terms, you understand them and then you correctly apply them in specific situations. Application is the ability to use learned material or to implement the material in new and concrete situations. Now here are a set of questions that are inherent in application level. Analysis. At this level, the individual has the ability to do a meaningful breakdown of material into its components and detect interrelationship of the components. The learner detects the manner in which the components are organized. There are three levels of analysis happening here. Analysis of elements, analysis of relationships, and analysis of organizational principles. Analysis of elements is concerned with the ability to identify the underlying elements such as assumptions, hypotheses, conclusions, views, values, arguments, statements, etc., and to determine the nature and functions of such elements. Analysis of relationship involves trying to determine how the elements identified are related to each other. For instance, how does the evidence relate to the conclusion? Analysis of organizational principles involves determining the principles or system of organization that holds the different elements and parts together. It involves finding the pattern, the structure, systematic arrangements, point of view, etc. Now take a look at the questions inherent in analysis level. Next is synthesis. While analysis involves breaking down principles, Synthesis involves building up or putting together elements. In other words, synthesis is concerned with the ability to put parts of knowledge together to form a new knowledge or a new pattern. It involves an ability to give shape or structure to statements or procedures. It includes categorizing items, composing poems and songs, writings, etc. It involves divergent thinking. It calls for imaginative, original, and creative thinking. It requires fluency of novel ideas and a flexible mind. It is a complex ability at a higher level of cognition. Synthesis can be subdivided into production of unique communication, which is concerned with the ability to put together a unique organizational form to convey a novel idea or a feeling or experience. Second one is production of a plan or proposed set of operations for solving problems or dealing with others. Third one is derivation of a set of abstract relations based on the result of the analysis of experimental data or observation. It is the ability to form concept generalizations, deduce prepositions, predictions, relationships based on the classification of experiences or observations. Now here are a list of questions that are inherent in synthesis level. The last level is evaluation. This is the highest level of cognitive structure. It is also the most complex ability that involves all the other abilities. It embodies elements of the other 5 categories. Evaluation is the ability to judge, check, and even critique the value of material for a given purpose. Now, this judgment can be both qualitative or quantitative. Evaluation can be subdivided into, first, judgment in terms of internal criteria. Now, internal criteria is concerned with tests of the accuracy of the work as judged by consistency, logical accuracy, and the absence of flaws. The second one is judgment in terms of external criteria. Now, this type of evaluation involves the classification of the phenomena in order that the appropriate criteria for judgment may be employed. That means to find the correct method of judgment. Thus, a work of history is to be judged by criteria relevant to historical works rather than to works of fiction. Classification of a work with regard to the ends to be achieved by the work, followed by a judgment as to whether the means used are appropriate to the ends in terms of efficiency, economy, and utility. This judgment classifies a work with regard to the ends that are to be achieved. It judges whether the means used to reach the end were appropriate. Now here are a list of questions that are inherent in evaluation level. You need to understand that these abilities in the cognitive domain are not mutually exclusive. They are in a logical order. The objectives attained in one level are made use of and built on as you move to higher levels. For example, application of knowledge is not possible without comprehension. And comprehension is not possible without a knowledge of the principles. Bloom's taxonomy has been expanded over many years by Bloom and other contributors, especially Lauren Anderson and David Krathwohl. In 2001, a revision of Bloom's taxonomy was published with the title A Taxonomy for Teaching, Learning and Assessment. We will discuss the changes that this title brought next week. Thank you.